We begin today in Jerusalem, where international leaders and top Israeli officials attended a state memorial ceremony Monday for Israel's former Prime Minister Ariel Sharon, who died last week. A towering and controversial military and political leader, Sharon died Saturday after 8 years in a coma. Under clear skies and bright sunshine, rows of mourners gathered around Sharon's coffin, which was draped in the blue and white Israeli flag. Israeli President Shimon Peres delivered a eulogy to Sharon at the beginning of the ceremony, comparing him to a lion and saying he contributed, quote, an unforgettable chapter to Israel's history. U.S. Vice President Joe Biden and former British Prime Minister Tony Blair were among those at the official ceremony outside Israel's parliament, the Knesset. Biden wore a skull cap and sunglasses and sat beside Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Now, in his speech, the vice president praised what he called Sharon's frankness.
There were times when he acted, and those actions earned him controversy and even condemnation. And in certain instances, American leaders, American presidents had profound differences with him. And they were never shy about stating them, nor was he ever shy about stating his position. As I said, from my observation, he was a complex man. But to understand him better, I think it's important. History will judge. He also lived in complex times in a very complex neighborhood.
He was a divisive figure, to say the least, in the Middle East, and his legacy has both positive and darker moments. Sharon, who is proudly known inside Israel as the bulldozer, was known to Palestinians as the butcher. As defense minister during the 1982 war in Lebanon, he was held indirectly responsible by an Israeli inquiry for the massacre of thousands of Palestinians at the Sabra and Shatila refugee camps, forcing him to resign. He also angered the Arab world by encouraging Israelis to build settlements on occupied Palestinian land. But he later pushed for the historic withdrawal from settlements in the West Bank and Gaza when the area was turned over to Palestinian rule for the first time in nearly 4 decades. That also a controversial policy. Israel increased security near the Gaza border on Monday for Sharon's funeral and warned the enclave's Palestinian rulers not to allow rocket fire during the ceremony. Joining us now is Daniel Nisman, Senior Intelligence Manager at Max Security Solutions, and Youssef Munayed, Executive Director of the Palestine Center. Gentlemen, thanks for being with me. Daniel, I want to start with you. You know, Biden called him a complex man, controversial even, other people would say. How do you remember Sharon?
Thank you for having me, Ahmed. I have to say that I actually met Sharon in 2005, or in 2004 rather, just as the disengagement from Gaza was heating up. And then when I was a soldier at the age of 18, I was one of 50,000 soldiers that were sent into the Gaza Strip to pull out 6,000 Jewish settlers at Sharon's order. So when I was really 18, I had a glimpse of Sharon's, in my opinion, his leadership, which Israelis from many generations, from the Independence War, the Yom Kippur War, the First Lebanon War, have also experienced that leadership, for better or for worse. In my humble opinion, what went on in 2005, the decision to evacuate the Gaza Strip, was one of the things that really saved this country as a Jewish and democratic state. And in fact, it is now known that he had a plan to continue evacuating settlements from the West Bank, even unilaterally, and he was simply cut down in the prime of his political career, so he was never able to really carry that out.
And, you know, obviously, Youssef, a very polarizing figure. We just heard a different way of remembering the Gaza withdrawal. A lot of people also are suggesting an aide, as the New York Times had published, implicated that there was another strategy there. I mean, this is such a controversial figure. Even world leaders who have come out and, you know, honored him or remembered him or commemorated him are getting a lot of flack online. And I want to just point to one of those. This is Carl Bildt on Twitter. He said, Ariel Sharon was a great leader of Israel, a brilliant military commander, but also a wise statesman seeing the necessity of peace. I mean, is that accurate in your opinion?
No, I think it's very far from accurate, actually. You know, even among the Israeli military establishment, Sharon was seen as an extremely controversial figure whose tactics on the battlefield often led to disgrace for the way Israel conducts itself in times of war and in times of peace as well. On multiple occasions, he was involved in leading actions, whether as a leader of a platoon all the way up to defense minister, where there was massive collective punishment, destruction of civilian homes and civilian lives that often led to some form of reprimand, but never completely removed him from official life and public life and positions of power in which he was able to continue imposing these rather destructive policies throughout the history of the modern Israeli state up until the point where he was prime minister. And I think it's important to note that even though, in this moment after his death, many people are talking about the withdrawal from the Gaza Strip, and that one particular event has many interpretations, as you noted. But the small number of settlers that were removed from Gaza pale in comparison to the very large numbers of increased settler population in the West Bank under Ariel Sharon's premiership. In fact, the largest single increase in the Israeli settler population under any Israeli premiership since Menachem Begin. So the notion that, Ariel Sharon was somehow inclined towards peace or the creation of a Palestinian state, I think it's something for the spinsters to engage in, but not for objective historians.
Certainly. And, because a lot of people have different opinions, I just want to come back to you for a second, Daniel. I mean, obviously, this is a man who is inherently controversial, and everyone can agree about that because of his policies at the time. He's one of the only Israeli leaders who fought in every single war. I also want to share with you what some people have said online. I just get your thoughts on this. Yusuf actually tweeted saying Sharon was responsible for wanton destruction and mass civilian casualties. It's not a Palestinian perspective, but an objective fact. Now, when we talk about the numbers that he was alluding to, Mahdi Hassan, the political director of the Huffington Post, the UK, said 5 numbers that suggest Ariel Sharon was a war criminal. When you hear these kinds of terms in terms of, the way that he's being remembered, Daniel, do you refute them? Do you understand why people feel this way? What do you think, is causing these kinds of allegations?
I mean, unlike the gentleman who joined us, I don't claim to be a historian. I can say that all of these things that were blamed on him indirectly, as you said at the beginning, the massacres in Sabra and Shatila, where Christian Phalangist allies of Israel perpetrated these massacres. These were things that were, even in the streets of Israel, he was considered a murder. He was called murderer, war criminal, in things that he are totally a stain on his career at that time. I guess Joe Biden put it the best, is that, it's the complex figure in a complex region and complex times. And I'm sure these are things that, it's during these periods of war, that's what earned him that. But in the end, what we have to remember, and I'd just like to refute what the gentleman said, that in terms of objectiveness and history, we also have to remember that Sharon pulled out settlements in the West Bank even as part of the Gaza evacuation. That's a fact that goes ignored too much. And the other fact that goes ignored is the fact that he had a plan to continue evacuating West Bank settlements. The people who choose to ignore that, and again, he was probably controversial within his own mind, but he, in my opinion, when Arafat, his arch nemesis, died, and Abu Mazen or Mahmoud Abbas came and took his place, it seems that he had kind of a switch, that he believed that peace or a Palestinian state was all of a sudden possible. And unlike many Israeli leaders before and after him, he started putting things in motion to make that happen on the ground, including things that really almost tore this country's society in half, but he did it. Yeah.
It's the kind of conversation where we could go back and forth and refute the plans with the facts and which is most ignored. A lot of people on my timeline pointing to the fact that, the way he's remembered isn't necessarily accurate in the media. And I think that's what was behind Mahdi's piece there. The New York Times obituary taking 16 paragraphs before they even mentioned the Sabra or Shatila massacres. But one person who's quite famous, Russell Simmons, made a slight mistake in remembering him, perhaps, saying, "Rest in peace, my friend Ariel Sharon. Great pleasure working with you. Special occasions. Your work to promote tolerance was inspiring." He later explained that he was referring to Shimon Peres, who he had worked with. Very quickly, Yusuf, we heard from Daniel. He was talking about how hundreds of thousands, I think 400,000 Israelis took to the streets to denounce and condemn Sharon after the massacre. He was, of course, demoted. I mean, looking forward, do you think that there is one lesson we can learn, for history as to how to look towards peace rather than war?
Yeah, just one quick point of correction. The Israeli commission that looked into Sabra and Shatila did find that while the Israeli military was indirectly responsible for the massacres, they noted that Ariel Sharon himself, as defense minister, bore, quote, personal responsibility for what took place, and recommended that he never hold another ministerial position ever again. That being said, I think the lesson here, and nothing makes this more clear than Ariel Sharon's life, is that the culture of impunity in Israel for war crimes is really not conducive to peace. I mean, one could imagine how many lives could have been saved, how many fewer settlements there would have been if Ariel Sharon was properly reprimanded in 1953 for his role in the massacre at Kibbutz and removed from that point forward from public life. Instead, of course, he continued a path that led very problematic and bloody marks throughout the rest of the history of Israel and Palestine.